I suppose I'm the immovable object? Catherine asked sarcastically, if you like. Well, I don't like, she said, scowling, because I've always thought that was an absurd question. Why? Leo asked. There is no possible answer. Their gazes clashed and held. Yes, there is, Leo said, seeming to enjoy her rising fury. Harry joined in the debate. Not from a scientific standpoint. An immovable object would require infinite mass, and the unstoppable force would require infinite energy, neither of which is possible. If you argue in terms of semantics, however, Leo countered with maddening calmness, there is an answer. Naturally, Harry said dryly. A Hathaway can always find a way to argue. Enlighten us, what is the answer? Leo replied with his gaze fixed on Catherine's tense face. The unstoppable force takes the path of least resistance and goes right around the object, leaving it far behind. He was challenging her, Catherine realized. Arrogant, manipulative cad, using poor Vanessa Darwin's plight to provoke her and implying what might happen if Catherine didn't give in to him. Go right around the object. Leave it far behind. Indeed. She jumped to her feet, glaring at him. Why don't you go on and marry her, then? Snatching up her reticule and Dodger's limp body, she stormed out of the apartments. Leo was instantly at her heels. Ramsay, Harry began. Not now, Rutledge, Leo muttered, striding after Catherine. The door was closed with a force that caused it to tremble in its frame. In the ensuing stillness, Harry looked at Poppy in bewilderment. I'm not usually slow-witted, he said. But what the devil were they bickering about? Miss Darwin, I think. Going to him, Poppy sat in his lap and linked her arms around his neck. She's with child and wants to marry Leo. Oh. Harry leaned his head against the back of the chair. His mouth twisted. I see. He's using it to try and push Catherine into making a decision. You don't approve, Poppy said rather than asked, stroking a damp lock of hair off his forehead. Harry gave her a wry glance. It's exactly what I would do in his position. Of course I don't approve. Stop following me. I want to talk to you. Leo kept pace with Catherine as she hurried along the hallway, his ground-eating strides accounting for every two of her short ones. I have no interest in anything you have to say. You're jealous. He sounded more than a little pleased by the fact of you and Miss Darwin. She forced a scornful laugh. I pity the both of you. I can't conceive of a more ill-destined match. You can't deny that she's a very attractive woman. Except for her neck. Catherine couldn't resist saying, what the devil is the matter with her neck? It's abnormally long. Leo tried, unsuccessfully, to smother a laugh. I can overlook that. Because if I marry her, I'll get to keep Ramsay House, and we'll have a baby already on the way. Convenient, isn't it? Moreover, Miss Darwin promised that I could philander to my heart's content, and she would look the other way. What about fidelity? Catherine asked in outrage. Fidelity is so passé. It's laziness, really, not bothering to go out and seduce new people. You told me that you would have no difficulty with fidelity. Yes, but that was when we were talking about our marriage. Marriage with Miss Darwin will be another thing entirely. Leo stopped with her as they reached the door of her suite. While Catherine held the sleeping ferret, Leo reached inside her reticule and extracted the key. Catherine didn't spare him a glance as he opened the door for her. May I come in? He asked. No, Leo pushed his way in regardless, and closed the door behind them. Pray don't let me keep you, Catherine said grimly, going to set Dodger in his little basket. I'm sure you have much to do. Starting with changing the name on the special license. No, the license is only good for you. If I marry Miss Darwin, I'd have to pay for a new one. I hope it's expensive, she said vehemently. It is. Leo approached her from behind and put his arms around her, hauling her back securely against him. And there's another problem. What is it? She asked, struggling in his grasp. His mouth touched the edge of her ear. I want you, he whispered. Only you. Always you. Catherine went still. Her eyes closed against a sudden wet sting. Did you accept her proposal? Leo nuzzled tenderly into the hollow beneath her ear. Of course not, Pigoose. She couldn't prevent a little sob of angry relief. Then why did you imply that you had? Because you need to be pushed. Otherwise you'll drag this affair out until I'm too decrepit to be of any use to you. Steering Catherine toward the bed, he scooped her up and tossed her to the mattress. Her spectacles went flying to the side. What are you doing? Catherine struggled indignantly, propping herself up on her elbows. She was buried in the masses of her skirts, with their sodden hems and heavy damp flounces. My dress is wet. I'll help you remove it. His solicitous tone was belied by the wicked gleam in his eyes. She floundered amid the layers and flounces, while Leo unhooked and unfastened her with astonishing efficiency. One would have thought he had more than 2 arms, as he turned her this way and that. His hands reaching everywhere. Ignoring her protests, he pulled the heavy skirt, with its stiffened muslin lining, away from the detachable bodice, and tossed it to the floor. Her shoes were removed and dropped over the side of the bed. Flipping Catherine to her stomach, he began on the fastenings of the heavily ruched bodice. I beg your pardon, I did not ask to be husked like an ear of corn. She twisted in an effort to push away his busy hands. A squeak escaped her as he found the tapes of her drawers and pulled them loose. With a low chuckle, Leo anchored her squirming body with his legs, and kissed the exposed nape of her neck. She felt warm all over, her nerves sparked by the touch of his sensuous mouth. Did you kiss her? She heard herself blurt out, her voice muffled in the bedclothes. No, love. I wasn't tempted by her in the least. Leo bit lightly into the soft muscle of her neck, stroked the fine skin with his tongue, and she gasped. His hand slipped inside her drawers and circled over her bottom. No other woman in the world could excite me as you do. But you're too damn stubborn, and far too good at protecting yourself. There are things I want to say to you. Do to you. And the fact that you're not ready for any of it is going to drive us both mad. He touched further between her thighs, finding wetness, stroking in soft circles. She moaned and writhed beneath him. Her corset was still snugly laced, the compression of her waist seeming to divert sensation down between her thighs. Although part of her rebelled at the feeling of being held down and caressed, her body reacted with helpless pleasure. I want to make love to you. Leo traced the inner structure of her ear with the tip of his tongue. I want to go as deep as you can take me, and feel you tighten around me, and I want to come inside you. A finger slid inside her, and another, and she whimpered softly. You know how good it would feel, he whispered, stroking her slowly. Yield to me, and I'll love you without stopping. I'll stay in you all night. Catherine gasped for breath, while her heart thumped madly. You would have me in the same position as Miss Darwin, she said. Pregnant and pleading for you to marry me. God, yes, I would love that. She nearly choked with indignation, while his long fingers teased her inside and out. Her body began to clench in a slow, steady pulse of desire. There were great swaths of fabric caught between their bodies, layers of remaining clothing, and all she could feel was his mouth at the back of her neck, and that devilishly persuasive hand. I have never said this to anyone before. Leo's voice was like ragged velvet. But the idea of you with child is the most insanely arousing thing I've ever imagined. Your belly all swollen, your BRSTS heavy, the funny little way you would walk. I would worship you. I would take care of your every need. And everyone would know that I'd made you that way, that you belong to me. You are so. She couldn't even think of a suitable word, I know. Woefully primitive. Laughter threaded through his voice. But I must be tolerated, because I'm a man and I really can't help it. He caressed her with gentle, explicit manipulation, his fingers slick and tireless. She felt a new flush of arousal, the liquid heat spreading out to her fingers and toes. Moving behind her, he tugged her drawers to her knees, and fumbled with the fastenings of his trousers. He let his weight settle on her deliciously. A blunt, moist pressure slipped between her thighs, not quite entering. White fire raced through her senses, and her body trembled at the verge of release. So close, you have a decision to make, Cat. Leo kissed the side of her throat hungrily, his mouth strong and wet. Either tell me to stop right now, or let me take you all the way. Because I can't withdraw at the last moment any longer. I want you too much. And I probably will make you pregnant, love, because I'm feeling rather potent at the moment. So it's all or nothing. Tell me yes or no. I can't. Catherine thrashed in frustration as his HPS lifted from hers. As he rolled her over to face him, she glared up at him. Unable to stop himself, he lowered his head and kissed her voraciously, savoring the sound of need that came from her throat. A pity, he said, breathing heavily. I was working up to something really lascivious. Rolling off her, he reached for the fall of his trousers, muttering something about the risk of doing himself permanent injury as he tried to fasten them again. Catherine watched him incredulously. You're not going to finish? He let out an unsteady sigh. As I said, all or nothing. She wrapped her arms around herself, trembling with desire until her teeth chattered. Why are you trying to torture me? It's becoming clear that a lifetime of patience wouldn't be enough to break through your guard. So I'll have to try something else. Leo kissed her gently and left the bed. After he raked both hands through his disheveled hair and straightened his clothes, he gave her a smoldering glance, followed by a grin that seemed to mock both of them simultaneously. I'm waging war, love. And the only way to win this kind of war is to make you want to lose. Only a woman made of stone could have lasted against the campaign Leo launched over the next week. It was courtship, he claimed, but there should have been another word for it. The way he kept Catherine constantly off balance with his sweetly subversive charm. One moment he provoked her into some nonsensical and highly entertaining argument, and the next he was soothing and kind. He whispered whimsical compliments and lines of poetry in her ear, and taught her naughty French words, and made her laugh at inappropriate moments. What Leo did not do, however, was try to kiss or seduce her. At first Catherine was amused by this obvious tactic, and then secretly miffed, and then intrigued. She frequently found herself staring at his mouth, so flawless and firm. She couldn't help remembering their past kisses, daydreaming about them. When they attended a private musical evening at a mansion on Upper Brook Street, Leo stole Catherine away as the hostess led a group of guests on a tour of the house. Following Leo to a private corner behind an arrangement of tall potted ferns, Catherine went eagerly into his arms. Instead of kissing her, however, he pulled her into the warm strength of his body. And held her. Simply held her, keeping her warm and close, letting his hands course slowly over her back. He whispered something secretive amid the pinned-up swirls of her hair. The words too soft for her to hear. What Catherine enjoyed above all was walking with Leo through the Rutledge Gardens, where sunlight stuttered through trees and hedges, and the breezes carried the crisp hint of approaching autumn. They had long conversations, sometimes touching on sensitive subjects. Careful questions, difficult answers. And yet it seemed they were both struggling toward the same goal, a kind of connection that neither of them had ever known before. Sometimes Leo drew back and looked at her for wordless moments as one might stare at a work of art in a museum, trying to discover its truth. It was compelling, the interest he showed in her. Seductive. And he was a wonderful conversationalist. Telling her stories about his childhood misadventures, about what it had been like to grow up in the Hathaway family, about the time he had spent in Paris and Provence. Catherine listened carefully to the details, gathering them like quilting scraps, piecing them together to form a better understanding of one of the more complex men she had ever met. Leo was an unsentimental rogue who was capable of great sensitivity and compassion. He was an articulate man who could use words either to soothe like a balm of honey, or dissect like a surgeon. Knife. When it suited him, Leo played the part of a jaded aristocrat, adeptly concealing the quicksilver workings of his brain. But sometimes in unguarded moments, Catherine caught glimpses of the gallant boy he had once been, before experience had weathered and hardened him. In some ways he's very much like our father was, Poppy told her in private. Father loved conversation. He was a serious man, an intellectual, but he possessed a streak of whimsy. She grinned, remembering. My mother always said she might have married a more handsome man, or a wealthier one, but never one who talked as he did. And she knew herself to be the kind of woman who would never have been happy with a dullard. Catherine could well understand that. Did Lord Ramsay favor your mother in any regard? Oh, yes. She had an artistic eye, and she encouraged Leo in his architectural pursuits. Poppy paused. I don't think she would have been pleased to learn that Leo would inherit a title. She didn't have a high opinion of the aristocracy. And she certainly wouldn't have approved of Leo's behavior in the past few years, although she would be very glad that he had decided to mend his ways. Where did his wicked wit come from? Catherine asked. Your mother or your father? That, Poppy said wryly, is entirely Leo's own. Nearly every day, Leo brought Catherine a small gift, a book, a box of sweets. A collar made of Brussels bobbin lace in a delicate pattern of openwork flowers. This is the loveliest lacework I've ever seen, she told him regretfully, setting the exquisite gift on a nearby table with great care. But my lord, I'm afraid, I know, Leo said. A gentleman shouldn't give personal items to a lady he's courting. He lowered his voice, mindful of being overheard by Poppy and the housekeeper, who were talking by the threshold of the Rutledge apartments. But I can't take it back, no other woman could do it justice. And Marks, you have no idea of the self-restraint I exercised. I wanted to buy you a pair of embroidered stockings with little flowers that run all the way up the insides of your, my lord, Catherine whispered, a light blush covering her face. You forget yourself. I haven't forgotten a thing, actually. Not one detail of your beautiful body. Soon I may start sketching you not D again. Every time I put a pencil to paper, the temptation nearly overwhelms me. She tried to look severe. You promised not to do that again. But my pencil has a will of its own, he said gravely. Catherine's color deepened, even as a smile tugged at her lips. You're incorrigible. His lashes lowered fractionally. Kiss me, and I'll behave. She made an exasperated little sound. Now you want to kiss me, when Poppy and the housekeeper are standing only a few yards away? They won't notice. They're involved in a riveting conversation about hotel toweling. Leo's voice lowered to a whisper. Kiss me. One little kiss. Right here. He pointed to his cheek. Perhaps it was the fact that Leo looked rather boyish as he teased her, his blue eyes alight with mischief. But as Catherine looked at him, she was nearly overwhelmed with a strange new feeling, a warm giddiness that invaded every part of her body. She leaned forward, and instead of kissing his cheek, she put her mouth directly on his. Leo drew in a surprised breath, letting her take the lead. And, giving in to temptation. She lingered longer than she had intended, her mouth softly teasing, her tongue shyly touching his lips. He responded with a low sound, his arms going around her. She sensed the rising heat in him, the carefully banked urges threatening to flare out of control.